Well, it's good news today for so many fans of the astronaut Sunita Williams. She's finally back on Earth after an epic 9-month odyssey in space. The NASA astronaut, along with Butch Wilmore, splashed down safely in the Gulf of Mexico. That's now called the Gulf of America. On board a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft, ending a mission that ballooned from 8 days to 286 because of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft woes. Cheers erupted in Gujarat's Jhulasan village as Williams waved triumphantly, her courage inspiring millions.
Dragon re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. All of that is expected. Altitude plane. And there you see it on your screen, drogue deployment.
After a 9-month-long wait, NASA astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore are stuck in space no more, bringing an end to the highly publicized and politicized saga that first began in June last year, after a bungled Boeing test mission extended their 8-day stay in space. The unplanned odyssey ended after the SpaceX Dragon capsule, carrying 4 astronauts, parachuted off the coast of Florida in the early hours of Wednesday morning. A photogenic landing with clear blue skies and a pod of dolphins greeting the joyful astronauts back to Earth. A vision of human innovation meeting nature.
It is awesome. They have Crew 9 home, just a beautiful landing.
Emerging from the capsule, the astronauts were seen smiling and waving to cheers and applause from the recovery crew, before being whisked away for medical evaluation to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where they would be reunited with their families and continue to adjust to their return to Earth. On her return home, Williams has become the astronaut with the second longest combined time in space. 608 days over 3 visits to the space station, the first in 2006.
Like her other crew members now will be assisted onto the mobility aid.
Their long-awaited return was celebrated across the globe, including in India, at Williams' ancestral village in Gujarat. Prime Minister Narendra Modi too welcomed the duo back to Earth, saying that their unwavering determination in the face of vast unknown will forever inspire millions. Meanwhile, the Trump administration, who had previously blamed the Biden government for quote-unquote abandoning the astronauts in space, was quick to take credit for their successful return. While NASA officials largely dodged questions about Trump and Elon Musk's claims.
Our job at NASA is to successfully and safely fly these missions. We fly it with the laws of physics, and we fly it with our commercial partners. And so oftentimes there may be things out in the press that may not be exactly what's happening. And our job is to fly these missions. And regardless of what you read in the press, our job is to fly successful missions, safe missions, and do the science we do on board the International Space Station.
Despite the politicization of this mission, NASA reiterated the importance of working with private partners such as Boeing and SpaceX. Nevertheless, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore's safe return is a testament to the power of human resilience and the lengths it can take humanity. Disha Bagchi for NDTV.
All right, so exciting times for space, and we are interested in the Sunita Williams story, not just because of her Indian roots, but because there's so much planned as far as the Indian space mission is concerned. We've got Dr. Ravi Marksaham with us. He's a former NASA scientist and global space ambassador. Amitabh Ghosh, a renowned NASA scientist. General Madhuri Kanitkar, she's a doctor, and she last served as Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff Medical under the Chief of Defense Staff, and had more than a small say in selecting India's astronauts, who will eventually, at least some of them, go up to space. Another wonderful guest, Madhavan Nair, space scientist and the former chairperson of the Indian Space Research Organization, and our science editor and dear friend Pallav Bagla. Pallav, the splashdown itself, where you had dolphins in the ocean, curious creatures as they are, it went off flawlessly, but just the descent back to Earth, it's a difficult process, it's a dangerous process. It took a great deal of time, right?
Oh, it took a great deal of time. It took a whole army of people to get them back on Earth, and that's a very normal process for space flights and humans when they return back to Earth. It was a 17-hour journey from the International Space Station back to the for splashdown, a very long journey, and 4 of them in that space capsule, SpaceX Crew Dragon, which has had a 100% success record, and they had a flawless splashdown. And for me, the exciting time is coming when the same Falcon 9 SpaceX Crew Dragon will be used to send India's astronaut very soon to space.
Yep.
So this was a dry run for all of us on what is going to be coming in the next few months. So a very exciting time, not just for getting Sunita Williams back on Earth, but also for the Indian program.
General Kanitkar, you've had a role as a doctor in picking the 4 Indian astronauts. Some will go up on Gaganyaan. One of them is scheduled to go up to the International Space Station as well. Before we talk about them, could you tell us a little bit about the physiological changes and stresses that any astronaut faces, particularly after a lengthy deployment in space once they return to Earth?
Thank you so much, Vishnu. It's a pleasure to celebrate Sunita's landing back at home. The power woman celebrating it with NDTV makes it really special. But I think it's a huge challenge. And my personal thing is it was excellent training, resilience, and a faith which let them hold on to an ordeal from 8 days to 9 months, which is, I mean, as a pediatrician, I can say it's a full term, right? Full term, normal, healthy delivery. So it's really been that. And physiologically, when they're there at this, and Pallav has been with me, I really wasn't part of selecting, but we brought in the role of the Indian Aviation Medicine department at Bangalore to help get a surgeon on board and take on research elements. But as far as physiology, the effects of gravity, the effects on the blood, the effects on the muscle tissues, there's a huge that's happening. And when it's for a prolonged time, it really becomes a catabolic where you start losing muscle mass. But when I looked at her, look at the kind of resilience she had. She ran a marathon. She kept herself occupied. And I think that is really what helped. But later, if I get an opportunity, I'm going to bring in another perspective as a vice chancellor where I've learned a lot of Ayurveda. The Indian knowledge systems really described a lot of the Vayu and the Akash, the Pancha Mahabhutas, and its effect on physiology. So I'll come to that a little later.
Do that in a little while. Dr. Ghosh, what's the learning experience been for NASA, not just in terms of this mission, but in terms of the Boeing Starliner? You judged that it just wasn't safe enough to bring them back. And SpaceX literally soaring. Where does this leave? Could you tell us the tale of these 2 spacecraft?
Right. So let's go back to 2010 or maybe even to 1997, I think, when the Kalpana Chawla disaster happened. There was a board which said that the shuttle is too old, needs to be retired. Come 2010, the shuttle was retired. NASA had no way to access space. They brought in this financial model where they paid 2 companies $2.5 and $4.2 billion to develop this new vehicle, which was SpaceX and Boeing. And the model was that they have to invest an equal amount. And if they were successful, NASA would buy flights from them. Well, 10 years later, SpaceX came through with the Dragon. And it's been 5 years. Dragon has been completely successful. But Starliner is still a little way away, perhaps. And I think it's a little way away. I mean, if you remember, Sunita still went to this Crew 9 still went on the on the Boeing spacecraft. Going forward, if you just think where are we headed in human spaceflight, the space station is going to be deorbited. SpaceX already has the contract for that into 2030, and so because it's too old. And going forward, NASA is going to go back to the moon, and perhaps the next place to set up a station would be the moon. So a lot of things have happened in these 30 years, and human spaceflight is still going to go forward. There are some other interesting angles outside of human spaceflight, which is the robotic spaceflight. The really interesting thing is Europa, where a satellite of Jupiter, where we found oceans, and so under the crust. And so that area is going to be a possible search for life, present life in the universe. So a lot of fascinating things will happen going forward in the next 10, 20 years.
Dr. Madhavan Nair, as we look at the Dragon spacecraft and images of it, splashing down, how important is, or tell us where India stands right now in making, a habitable spacecraft. The Gaganyaan program is premised on that, and the technology is being developed in India. It's not just about building a spaceship; it's ensuring that it is compliant with human life. How challenging is that for us to be doing it at home?
First of all, we are all excited and extremely happy that Ms. Sunita Williams and the team have safely landed on Earth. It's actually an adventurous and really difficult mission, which NASA and some of the private industries together have managed extremely well. But looking back, it shows the criticality of the technologies, what we are using, and the probability of failure. Look at a company like Boeing, which has really perfected and has got a lot of insight into the technology as well as the manufacturing of the rocket as well as the spaceship. But in spite of that, they got into a glitch, and that has resulted in this catastrophic, rather the failure of the return module. But that shows that, it is so complex, and we had to make the system more and more reliable. ISRO has recognized this aspect, and there is a very massive efforts are being put in to make the rocket systems, first of all, for the upward journey, more reliable than what it is today, bringing in redundancies, monitoring the health of the various subsystems, and in case of any problem, how to jettison and how to safely return the astronauts back to ground, and so on. So ISRO has addressed these issues in advance itself, and the design has completed a couple of years back, and now we are well into the process of manufacturing the modules. These modules will have the proper life support system and the safety system to not to forget, and also the type of conveniences which is needed. You look at the capsule, the Dragon capsule, and the Apollo capsule, which has returned on it. The Apollo capsule was charred totally on the outside, and it was virtually burned, entire surface. Whereas this capsule is perfect, and perhaps you can just brush it and use it for relaunch. So to that extent, the technology has gone. Inside, the conveniences provided, it is almost like in an aircraft with all the electronics and gadgets and so on. So ISRO has given importance to providing not only the life support system, but also safe transport from ground to the orbit first, and then from the orbit back. Of course, we had only a very limited experience in return flight. That is a spacecraft recovery experiment way back in 2007. That has given us some confidence, but still we had to go a long way, and we had to keep our fingers crossed.
Dr. Ravi Marksaham, in as much as we will come back to this conversation on modules and ensuring that they are human compatible, could you tell us a little bit about the rocket technology that we've now seen SpaceX develop so well, and also recovering boosters, not just vertically out at sea or on launch pads, but actually using chopsticks or pincers, call them what you want, in recovering these. So therefore, reusing parts of spaceships, of rockets, it seems to be the future. It saves millions of dollars ultimately. How is that key key in terms of the future of space travel?
I have. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me, and also the panelists. I had a great opportunity to take Dr. Madhavan Nair on a tour of NASA Kennedy Space Center once upon a time with 15 of his ISRO members. And it's very nice to come back to meet all these people now. So as far as the rocket goes, I have two thoughts, okay? One is, space shuttle was a vehicle. It was a totally reusable vehicle. And yes, it was expensive, but then human space flight requires safety, okay? So when you don't worry about safety, you just have payloads, then it's a different ball game, okay? And so as far as NASA goes, if you look at historically, we have always wanted to be the leader in space exploration, but then also we wanted to promote the commercial side of the technologies, okay? So really what happened was the use of the shuttle program was, it was complete basically because we built the International Space Station. So if you look at Werner von Braun, his whole idea was to go to the moon using a Saturn V rocket. But now, if you want to build a station, you can't use any vehicle. So there is no vehicle today anywhere in the world to build a place like the International Space Station. I was fully involved with it. I sent 100 rockets to ISS, to the space, 100 space shuttles, 700 people. Also, I was involved in entire building of the station right from day one when Zarya met Unity Node 1. So what I'm trying to impress upon you is, as we evolve in technology, we have to be always concerned, is it a human space flight or just a payload space flight? Because I've personally sent 500 payloads to the ISS after it was built from 2011 to 2016. So it is important that you look at the reusability from that standpoint because people don't appreciate. I'm an engineer. I'm a little bit worried when it starts reusing the parts because of fatigue and fracture mechanics and stuff like that. I'm sure ISRO knows all about it. So let's make sure that we understand shuttle was really a Pushpak Viman, like my mom used to say. It went to space, landed with 7 people like a royalty on the ground. Now we are landing in ocean just like Apollo days because we just cannot take 7 people and 50,000 pounds of payload at the same time. So you look at the cost benefits of both.
Got it. So cost benefits absolutely huge. Dr. Ghosh, you had a point. Go ahead.
Yes, I had a quick point. So the way of thinking about it is today, if you go from Delhi to Washington, you use the same plane to come back. But in our business, in the launch business, you had to rebuild the vehicle. So your cost has to include the cost of making a new vehicle. So this reusability has caused a paradigm shift. It has probably changed, made it like 95% cheaper or 98% cheaper. A journey to, say, Jupiter, of spaceflight to Jupiter or Uranus. Uranus is probably the next mission that NASA, large flagship mission that NASA is planning, is suddenly 95% cheaper. So going to Mars is probably 95% cheaper with the new Starship that you just mentioned. So it has changed the economics, and going forward, this is going to cause many more human missions as well as missions to the outer solar system to become realistic.
The only thing I can add
you had
is,
a point to make. Would you like to go ahead, ma'am? You were talking about what you had learned recently. Go ahead, ma'am. Yeah.
I think this is a very important situation where 8 days has been prolonged. And though we understand some of the physiology, whether it's acclimatization when they go into high altitude, whether they go into space, I think it's really important to see actually what happened. And I'm really hoping that the data that comes out of their evaluation is shared as a learning lesson for all of us. And coming to, like you mentioned, the push, I was fascinated when we had a little discussion on this and an integrated approach. And I was surprised to find that the entire description of going in space and coming back where the Akash was this has been described in the Ashtang Hridaya Sutra 9 in an ancient Indian knowledge system. And if you read that in Sanskrit, it actually tells exactly what's happening into the physiology, whether it's bone, whether it's muscle, whether it's your systems. And it also tells when you come down what is likely to happen. So it will be very interesting to know how that physiology has behaved when they've come back onto Earth and use that as a learning lesson and improve on it further. I think that's a very, very important aspect, which I thought I must flag here. Thank you so much.
Pallav, what's the next big step as far as Gaganyaan is concerned, our human spaceflight mission?
Well, I just met the ISRO chief a few hours ago. We had a detailed discussion on what the status of Gaganyaan is. We have 3 uncrewed flights to do before we can send a human in space. And before we do the uncrewed flights, there are a dozen tests to be done. And Dr. Narayanan very specifically emphasized to me, safety first, safety always. And a happy landing has to be ensured before Gaganyaan can carry an astronaut in space, a Gaganyatri from Sriharikota to space. So Gaganyaan is a while away, I think at least 2 years away. We may see an uncrewed flight this year, which is with an unpressurized crew module. The crew module is still in the making. We wanted to buy the environment control life support system. It turned out to be too expensive, so we are attempting to make that on our own. It's taking a while. But whenever we do that, Vishnu, we would still be the 4th country. There is no other country which is anywhere near doing independent human space flight after Russia, America, and China.
Right.
So 4th country, and when we do it, we would be in a right position to do it. But the desire to do that is very important.
That's not lacking.
That's not lacking. Enough money has been sanctioned by the government. The government has given a good plan. End of the day, India wants independent access to space on our own terms. So at some point, if we have to inhabit a place outside the Earth, we don't have to rely on NASA, we don't have to rely on Russia, we don't have to rely on China. We would have our own vehicles and we would have our own astronauts.
But you're
going
also
up and
collaborating with them, for example, on the Artemis missions, which is the peaceful use of space and deep collaboration with NASA.
Well, we have just signed the Artemis Accord. We haven't signed up to the mission. We are still open about that. It's still a long way away. But yes, India and NASA, the first rocket which India launched was a Nike Apache, which came from America. And very soon we will see an Indian rocket carrying the first government satellite from America on an Indian soil. The NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar satellite, which is the single most expensive civilian Earth imaging satellite, costing $1.2 billion.
Right.
It's right now sitting in Bangalore, waiting for the naughty boy to be ready. No longer naughty, now tamed. But it will be launched in
rocket, right?
Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle Mark II. Dr. Madhavan Nair is very familiar with that, and we would be using that GSLV Mark II to launch it. So whole thing is coming around. From the first rocket, now an American satellite being launched on an Indian rocket. Fascinating times. And before that, our Gaganyatri, Group Captain Suvanshu Shukla, going to the International Space Station in the next few months. I am very excited about that.
No, we all are. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. Pallav did speak to the ISRO chairperson just a little while back on Sunita Williams and a lot more. Let's listen in.
Indian origin, NASA astronaut Sunita Williams came back safely to Earth after a more than 9-month mission, an unprecedented mission. I have with me Dr. V. Narayanan, the chairman of the Indian Space Research Organization. Namaskar, Dr. Narayanan.
Namaskar.
Dr. Narayanan, you watched the landing of Sunita Williams in the Gulf of America. What was your feeling and any message for her and India?
No, in fact, we are closely following it up, the entire developments, not only today, last 9 months. And today, we could not sleep even a single second because it is a very, very happy occasion. I was quite confident, 100% confident when yesterday, when the system got undocked from the ISS and started moving by operating towards the Earth by operating the thrusters. In fact, they operated the thrusters 4 times. I was 100% confident this will be a very grand, successful mission and Madam will be landing very safely and rather flashed down very safely. And message is like this. This type of missions are very, very complex mission because getting undocked and traveling, the entire thing. The ISS is at altitude of something around 450 kilometers. First operation is getting undocked. Then this has to move away. The module has to move away from the space station. Second thing is bring down to 400 kilometer orbit. From there, it is going around and you have to target exactly where you are going to really flash down. Then accordingly, the entire system has to be oriented, rather tuned. Then you have to do the power descent operation. Now, a set of thrusters, if I am correct, there were 28 thrusters and 5 were isolated, remaining thrusters were there, and then using the entire thing, this entire operation has to be carried out. And when you talk about this type of mission, there are a lot of things involved. Number one.
Did it give you goosebumps watching it come down?
In fact, I was so happy to see Madam coming out with smiling face. And when she came out with a smiling face, I was also smiling.
Wonderful. Now, last time when I interviewed Sunita Williams, I had asked her if she would be willing to help in India's Gaganyaan program, and now we have a far bigger Gaganyaan program. Will ISRO be looking forward to having her contribute to India's astronaut program? Because she loves India.
In fact, ISRO is an organization open for the support. But our Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji, he is the minister for the Indian space program. We will have discussion with him. And he has got a different vision for the country. And whatever we think, he thinks in a different way. And finally, he will decide what
way. But he has already invited her to India in his personal letter to astronaut Sunita Williams. So
I will be happy to really have interaction. And whatever support is there, as Chairman ISRO and Secretary Department of Space, I will be very happy to get whatever wisdom is there. I will be happy to do that.